Thank you, Mr. President. I'll be brief as possible here. I just kind of grieve seeing this movement plod on in West Virginia. I understand that there's medical benefits with marijuana, and I certainly support those wholeheartedly. But I smell a rat, Mr. President, and I think that, to be honest, that we all know viscerally that there's something that's behind this. Every state that has become a state that has legalized marijuana first was a state that legalized it medically. Every state that has legalized marijuana or has had medical marijuana legalized has had an increase in the teen usage of marijuana. What we're doing here is we're taking the mystery and the fear away from a Schedule I drug. And we're doing it in front of our young people all across the state. We're saying as a culture that this is not a dangerous drug and that what we're doing is fine and that there's nothing to be afraid of. We know intuitively that there is something to be afraid of. In 2006, 16% of the admissions to treatment facilities were for marijuana. 7,000 studies, Mr. President, 7,000 studies on marijuana, and not one has shown marijuana to be safe. 1.8 million of the state and local arrests in 2005 were for marijuana. The reaction for motor skills, such as driving, reduced by 41% after one single joint. Look to Colorado, Mr. President. Look to Colorado and all the traffic accidents and how they've gone up exponentially after Colorado became a state that legalized marijuana. What are we doing? In 1995, 165,000 people entered drug rehab, naming marijuana as the primary drug of addiction. Marijuana has 421 chemical components. Statistics show that marijuana use can predispose people for substance abuse later in life. People who are addicted to marijuana are 3 times more likely to be addicted to heroin. Let me repeat that, Mr. President. People who are addicted to marijuana are 3 times more likely to be addicted to heroin. I think that it's important that our young people in America hear in no uncertain sound from the adult population, those of us who say that morality is important and absolutes are important and absolute truth is important, and to engage in a drug, a Schedule I drug like marijuana, is very dangerous. And I understand that that's not necessarily the issue with this bill, but it is the issue that is going on in the aggregate. And we had to say, it is incumbent upon us to say, as the generation ahead, that this is wrong. What about the irony, Mr. President, that we are living in right now, that with a drug epidemic all across this country, young people dropping like flies, and all of a sudden we're going to stand up and say, well, listen, marijuana is not that big of a deal. It is a big deal. It is dangerous. And I believe that this bill is further dissolving that mystique and fear that is naturally there with the drug of marijuana. Jeff Sessions, our Attorney General, has said that he thinks it's a problem. Here's a quote from the U.S. Attorney, Michael Stewart. Let me read it. This is just from 2 days ago. He said, I have visited many treatment facilities. Every single treatment facility, every single one has told me, quote unquote, marijuana is a gateway drug. My office is preparing to enforce laws against marijuana aggressively. Then all caps he says, aggressively. Things used to be clear in our country. Before we took the Bible out of school, before we took prayer out of school, before we threw moral absolutes into the trash can, before we decided as a nation that we were no longer going to be a Christian nation, and then after that we became a balkanized nation with 1,000 different factions and 1,000 different philosophies and 1,000 different ways of believing things and 1,000 different battles. We used to be a nation of the Ten Commandments, Mr. President, where we said that we believed that we would have no other gods but the God of the Bible. That we would not create graven images, that we would not take the name of the Lord in vain, that we would remember the Sabbath day to keep it holy, that we would honor our father and our mother. And here's an irony, if I could take a quick parenthetical route here for a second, but the sixth commandment says, thou shalt not kill. We quit teaching thou shalt not kill in our schools in America, and we have kids that are getting guns and killing. What if we had told them, thou shalt not kill from a very early age, and they'd have had that ingrained in their heads? Thou shalt not kill is a commandment, not just from us, but a commandment from on the high, from God Almighty. God said that, not me. Thou shalt not commit adultery. Thou shalt not steal. Thou shalt not bear false witness. Thou shalt not covet. The 10 commandments of God. That there is a right and wrong. That there are moral absolutes. And that things like marijuana are dangerous. And it is our job as the adult generation to say that to our young people. And I'm going to say that to the young people today. And I understand I'm in the minority, but I don't care. I'm voting no on this bill. I understand that it's not legalizing marijuana, but I do understand also that I believe in my soul that this bill is part of doing its job to dissolve that wall of mystique and fear that we have for Schedule I drugs like marijuana. Here we are right in the middle of a drug war. Here we are right in the middle of seeing our young people drop like flies all across the country, and we're going to say, no big deal. It's a big deal. I urge you to know. Thank you, Mr. President.
Further discussion, the senator from Logan County.
Thank you, Mr. President. You know, if we're trying to do away with things that are dangerous, then how come we haven't attacked alcohol? Because there's more accidents and probably more deaths that have occurred with alcohol than marijuana. Marijuana is not addictive. The senator from Morgan just stood up and spoke about how marijuana helps so many different illnesses out there. Schedule I narcotics are drugs that have no medical purpose, but yet it helps Parkinson's disease, multiple sclerosis, severe ADHD, PTSD, Crohn's disease, and the list goes on and on and on. Now, I'm not happy with what we have in front of us, but that's what we have. You know, we created and passed historic legislation last year. We created a medical marijuana board that is full of experts. Dr. Gupta is one of them. We have a patient advocate that is an actual cancer survivor that are telling us what works. And I think it's important for us to finally open our eyes and realize that we can help so many people. Did God make a mistake? Did He make a mistake when He gave us that seed that was used for thousands of years to heal its people? And only until alcohol and the paper industry got in the middle of it is when it became villainized. It's time for us to open our eyes and do what we can to try to help the people in our state that have been struggling for far too long, that desperately need the ability to have some relief from the illnesses that our people face. Because the truth is, poor people get cancer more than rich people because poor people drink from the tap. Thank you, Mr. President.
Further discussion, the senator from Harrison County.
Thank you, Mr. President. I know I have the feeling that the sky is falling right now, but I just want to give everybody my assurance I don't think the sky is falling. First of all, I think we all agree that this bill is strictly for medical marijuana. It's strictly to help sick and ill people. I understand my friend from Wood County's concern, but you know, the only explanation I can give for states that start out with medical marijuana and move on to legalizing marijuana is they realize that the sky is not falling, that it's not the end of the world, that, as my friend from Logan said, alcohol is a much more insidious drug. Spouses beat each other, people kill each other, car wrecks are extraordinary. But let me just tell you real quick how things get out of control when people want to spin things a certain way. We heard about car wrecks in Colorado. Car wrecks have gone up. I don't know about exponentially, but they've gone up, you know, more than 100%. The problem was there weren't that many to begin with. Pot DUIs went from 33 prior to legalization to 73 last year. Now that's an exponential increase, there's no doubt about that. All drug DUIs went from 31 to 75, about the same numbers. Deaths in which marijuana was found in the system of the driver, not necessarily attributable to the death, but they're all counted the same, went from 129 to 151 between prior to legalization and afterward. Alcohol in the same state killed 4,672 in the same year. That's an exponential difference. Now, in Colorado, we're not talking about legalization. Let's just be clear, we're talking about medical marijuana, necessarily and prescribed by the doctors, like the doctors we have in here who I trust eminently to do what's right. Opioid use is down, there's different estimates, but between 12 and 25%. Pot arrests are down 46%, emptying out their jails. Arrests under the age of 18 have stayed steady. And while there has been an increase in poisonings due to marijuana, they've gone from 44 prior to legalization, 277 in 2015. That's an exponential increase. But we're talking about out of 50,000 poisonings every year in that state. The benefits are immeasurable. Manage pain instead of giving out harmful, addictive opioids, which, by the way, are Schedule II. Muscle spasms in MS patients, epilepsy, seizures in young children, Alzheimer's, PTSD that my friend always talks about. It slows brain cancer, deals with diabetes and fibromyalgia, rheumatoid arthritis, and even digestive issues. This is the best thing we can do. Maybe this is the best we can do. I think it was a better bill or a better committee substitute before we had to go through the last mechanization of changes to satisfy some people on the other side. But the sky's not falling. Alcohol is such a much more dangerous drug, and it's not even on the schedules. Let's do the right thing, pass this bill, and don't be concerned. You're doing the right thing for West Virginia. Thank you.
Further discussion for our